Good evening. Could you please shortly introduce yourself and describe the work you have been doing in your community?
Okay. My name is Cristel Amis, and I'm the project coordinator and one of the founders of the Black Women's Rape Action Project. We've been going in London since 1991. We are former service users ourselves, many of us, and we campaign for justice for survivors of rape and racist attacks, because there are very few resources for us, and we rarely get an acknowledgement of what we've been through. And given how hard it is to even speak about what we've been through, we are demanding that, first of all, justice is done when we are seeking asylum from rape and other torture in other countries, when we've suffered domestic violence, or when we've been raped in the UK.
Who do you see as the main actors that have to spread or raise awareness about the injustices and promote and educate justice at the level of society?
Well, it's only when women speak out about what we've been through that anybody has the faintest idea of how traumatized we are, how difficult it is to get the resources, for example, lawyers who will be responsible and accountable to us, as opposed to run the cases that they want to run. We're up against appalling conviction rates for rape. In the UK, 93% of rapists, of reported rapists, get away with it. We lay the blame fairly on the Crown Prosecution Service for not gathering the evidence, the police for not taking women seriously, women and girls, and there's a whole history of that happening. You're probably aware, or some people will be aware, of what's called the Jimmy Savile issue, where people in positions of power have been able to hide what they've been doing, and they've been able to do that with the complicity of other people in power. But once people have been speaking out, and it takes a lot of courage to do that, because the very first thing that happens is you're told it's not true, it didn't happen. So once women and girls make that quantum leap to speak about it, we're demanding that it be taken seriously, properly and fully investigated, and the perpetrators punished.
Mm-hmm. What, in your opinion, are some ways to deal with the judgment and the stigma and the suffering that this person are going through? And
well, as women, we are up against sexism, and as black women, we're up against sexism and racism, and the two really do conspire to deny us justice. The most obvious of that is when a woman comes from another country and says, I've been raped by soldiers, for example, in Congo or Uganda. Even though everybody knows that that is endemic, it's not taken seriously. So when you say who are the main actors, it's at every level. It's at every level, and it begins with a lack of caring. If it was my mother or my sister or your mother or your sister, you'd really want for somebody to take it seriously and to act on it. And that's what we're asking. No matter where we're from, no matter who we are entitled to the same justice. Anything less than that is racism. And as I say, if you're a woman, it combines with sexism.
You were mentioning resources a little bit earlier. What are the keys and guarantees for a fairer redistribution of resources to rape victims?
A fairer redistribution?
We're talking about affordability or accessibility or quality or even availability of resources. Or is it a combination of all? Which sticks more for you?
It's everything. It's everything. Because at the level that resources are being cut in the UK, it's unprecedented. Escape routes that we traditionally have had, if we are victims of domestic violence, for example, are being cut off. If the local refuge in your area is closed, who do you turn to? Where do you go to? If you can't get a GP who will even examine you, how can you overcome that barrier? The barriers are many and varied, and they're at every single level, as I've said, of society. And the only way to really challenge that is to speak out and to say, this is what happened to me. This is the injustice. We use the mechanisms we can. For example, we will use an MP or a local councillor. We'll write to them, we'll pursue them, we'll go to their surgeries and say, take this seriously. We've had women, for example, whose status depends on staying with a violent partner, because there's a rule that says you have to be 2 years married, and if you break up your marriage before that, it will not be considered. Your status will not be given unless there's exceptional circumstances. Now, some women find it very difficult, for example, women from Muslim communities, to report that. So your options are silence and suffering, or speaking out, and then possibly being taken into a detention centre and on the flight back to the country, where you will face further stigmatisation because you are now a single mother or a single woman. And, there have been instruments of law that have won at levels a very key ruling called Shah Islam, which acknowledged that women from Pakistan are particularly a social group and therefore vulnerable if they are returned. But these instruments are very rarely used. You need a good lawyer to use them, and you need to absolutely challenge the immigration authorities when you are refused. To do that takes guts and gall and many years of campaigning often.
During the workshop, several positive examples have been mentioned. So when people do speak out, who's willing to listen? And please describe several success stories, if we can call them this way.
Success stories.
Yeah,
well,
it's not the best. Doesn't do much justice to it.
No, but the thing is that women do win, and we have within our group we have kind of a bit of a motto that we borrowed from the mothers of the disappeared in Argentina, who for years went to the main square in Buenos Aires and demanded to know from the authorities what happened to their loved ones. They said, the only struggle you lose is the struggle you give up. And it's absolutely true. If you don't give up, you cannot lose. And one woman who stands out in my mind right now is a woman who was imprisoned for bringing Class A drugs into this country in 2005, and she was forced to do it by a gang that threatened to kill her and her 8 children if she didn't do it. So that's a kind of coercion which many women suffer. It wasn't acknowledged in the British courts that coercion had forced her to do it. Instead, she was given a 9-year prison sentence. At the end of 5 years of that sentence, she was deemed to be a foreign national criminal, sent to the removal centre, Yarlswood Removal Centre, with a view to deportation. And she, in the meantime, had made an asylum claim on the grounds that if she was returned to the country, the gang would find her. Not only would they be ready to take further retribution, she had the drugs had been confiscated, there was no money, and her children were being systematically terrorised, were already in hiding. So she fought on, and she went on hunger strike along with 70 other women inside the detention centre. What happened is they were corralled and what we call kettled in an airless corridor for about 8 hours while the authorities tried to deny what was happening. The women had gone on hunger strike protesting exactly those kind of examples of the injustices they were suffering of being detained. The ministers at the time, Labour government, said that there was nobody in a detention centre who wasn't responsible themselves for frustrating the process. This was absolutely untrue, and this woman's particular case proved it, because the courts had granted her the right to remain under Article 3, which is a very high threshold, inhumane and degrading treatment that she would be suffering if returned. The courts had granted that, the independent courts, but the Home Office authorities had appealed the court's decision. So she was left languishing there, and that's why she went on hunger strike, and that's why a number of women did. At the end of their 40-day hunger strike, which was quite a battle, some of them were quite ill, but at the end of it, many were slowly and determinedly released to fight on. And, I can say that She herself won full refugee status, but that again was challenged. They tried to give discretionary leave to remain, and she fought on, and now she has won the right to remain permanently in the UK. But the stigma of being a foreign national criminal will never leave her. They'll always want to say, it's on your record that you brought drugs into this country. Never mind the cost, and any mother, me included, would have done what she did. And I think it's time to wake up and listen when women like that tell you very bravely, and she's been in The Guardian, and she's been in the House of Commons, and she's been everywhere she can to speak out, to shout it out, and not just for herself, but for the other women that she met while she was in Yarlswood. It takes a lot of commitment, but when you win something, you win not just for yourself, you win for everybody. She didn't just win for her, she won for me.
Thanks a lot for this heartful story. One last thing, what is written on your t-shirt?
Every mother is a working mother. And that's, if we want to say it less politely, 2 fingers up at anybody who says that mothers are workless and that we should somehow go out somewhere else. We're only productive when we go somewhere else to work. Well, we say we're very productive. We reproduce the entire human race, and for that we want not only recognition but payment for that work.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.